In this video I'm going to demonstrate the method of drawing the three main components of the toolbox in Onshape. So our three main components are our end pieces, our side pieces with the rebates on them, and our handle. So as always in Onshape, we're going to create a new document and we're going to give it a name. So we're going to call this one Toolbox, and we're going to wait for it to open. Now I'm going to set this document up straight away with the three part studios that we need. So in the bottom left hand corner here, insert new tab, we're just going to insert two more part studios, and then we're going to rename them. So to rename them, remember we right click on the part studio, click on rename. We're going to have our ends, we'll have our sides, and we'll have our handle. So let's start with the sides. The sides are probably the simplest piece to draw, so let's start with those. So the side pieces, if we're looking from front on the toolbox, right, or side on technically, we're going to call that the front. So I'm going to start with a sketch and select the front. I'm going to use my center point rectangle. Start from the center point, draw a rectangle out. Now these are going to be 500 long. Remember, if we want to modify these later, we always can. So if we get the dimensions a little bit off, we can always come back and fix them later. So I've got my 500 long by 140 high. Alright, we're then going to tick that sketch. Now we're going to turn that 2D shape into a 3D one. We're using 19mm thick timber. You could be using 12mm, so depending on the thickness you're using, it's either 19 or 12. I'm going to do 19. Alright, and I'm going to click on that rectangle I drew to turn it into a 3D piece. Now the sides of the toolbox have rebate joints on either ends, so we can very quickly add those by doing a new sketch and selecting the face we want to put the rebates on. We use our offset tool and select the edges and how far in we want to come. So depending on whether you're using 12mm or 19 for your end pieces, they're going to sit in these rebates. If you're using 19mm, you want to offset in 19. If you're using 12mm, you want to offset in 12. Again, you can always come back in and change this later. So I'm going to do 19. I'm going to do the same thing from the other end. 19. Okay. I'm then going to tick that sketch to accept it. I'm then going to use my extrude tool to select those two rectangles I've just drawn using the offset tool, and I'm going to remove, and I want to remove half of my thickness. So if it's a 19mm thick piece that you've made these sides out of, half of that is 9.5. Okay, if it was 12mm, half of that would be 6. So it needs to be half of the thickness of what you made your sides. So mine were 19, so I'm going to go with 9.5, and I'm going to accept that. So that's my rebate joints. Okay, the only other thing we have left to add into this, and if we want to come back into Onshape later and draw up the base, okay, we need to put the groove in place for where the base is going to go. So again, we want to do a sketch. The groove's going to go along the bottom here. Okay, so I'm going to select this face. I'm going to use my offset tool, and I'm going to do two lots of offsets from this bottom line. I need to know how far up before the groove starts, and then how far up before the groove ends. Okay, so for the first one, I'm going to go up 5mm. Okay, I'm then going to do an offset from that offset for how wide the groove is. So the groove's going to be the width of the table saw blade and the overall thickness of the plywood we use, which is 3mm. If you were using 7mm ply, it would be different. You'd have to do it for that. So I'm going to click on this line, make sure the offset's going inwards, click again. So I was doing 3mm. If you were doing 7mm ply, you would need this to be 7mm. Again, you can come back in and change it later if you need to. So 3, enter. I'm happy with that sketch. I've got the area that I need. I'm going to click it. Okay. Now what I need to do is use my extrude tool to go in and select that rectangle. I'm going to remove. Okay. Now I'm going to remove the same amount as what I removed from my rebate, just to make it nice and uniform. And it's an easy number for me to remember when I come back to draw the base later. So I'm going to go 9.5 in. It'll also give plenty of support to the base. It's the most support we can give that base. So 9.5, I'm going to tick it. So we can now see this side piece. I've got my rebates that are going to accept the ends, and I've got a nice groove that will accept the plywood. Okay. Now let's say I wanted to modify any of those numbers. Let's say I wasn't happy with how far up and how much material I've got down there. This is a bit thin. I feel like it might be a bit flimsy for supporting the plywood. I can go back into that original sketch and into these numbers, and I can double click on either of them. Say I wanted to come up 10 millimeters instead. Okay, I can change that. Click on the tick to accept it, and it will bring it up a bit higher. Okay, I was happy with where it was at 5 millimeters, so if I want to undo that, I could click up the top here on this undo section, or I can use Control Z as a keyboard shortcut and it will undo it and put it back to how it was. Alright, so that's the side piece done. Now we're going to move on to the end pieces. Now for the end pieces, we're going to add a couple more details to this end piece to show some construction lines, which are where our joints are going to be for the dominoes. So because our end boards, the overall width of them ends up to be around 205 millimeters, because we join two pieces together and then we cut half off one of them, so it ends up being 140 plus about 65, so 205 wide. I want to put in a construction line to show where that domino joint is. So I'm going to show you how to do that as part of this drawing. Now we drew the sides on the front. Alright, so what we're going to do with the end pieces is we're going to draw them on the right so that they're in the correct orientation when we go to do the assembly. So I'm going to select my sketch tool. Apologies for the phone going off in the background, we'll just ignore that. So I've selected my sketch tool. I'm going to select my right axis and a center point rectangle. Same as always, click from the center. I'm going to start drawing a rectangle, and as I said before, we want 205 as our width, so that's going to be our bottom measurement, 205, and our height for our ends is going to be 300. Okay, again, if we ever wanted to modify these, we can come back in and we can change them later. Okay, that's our initial rectangle. Now we're going to add in a construction line. So as I said, we've got a 140 wide board and then another board that are joined together. So to show that, we're going to use our offset tool. Alright, we're going to click on one side, make sure it's going inwards. We're going to click again, we're going to type in 140. Okay, then what we're going to do, we're going to click on that offset line, and we're going to come up here, and this tool just here is our construction line tool. Alright, its keyboard shortcut is Q. If we click on that, it's going to make that line dotted. Okay, so if we went to do a set of plans for this later, we would be able to show this dotted line to show that there's a joint here, and we could label that joint in our drawings as a domino joint or a tongue and groove joint, whatever joint we're using to widen, but we've showed there that that's where the widening joint occurs. 140 across, and then the other piece is joining here. Okay, so I've put that construction line in. What I'm then going to do is I'm going to start doing my offsets to show the angles that we cut out of the ends. So to do that, I'm actually going to switch over the view, so up in the top right hand corner here. So it's a bit easier to see all my measurements. I'm going to click on this right hand view, and I get a nice 2D view of this end piece. Now, for my angled cutouts that come down like this, like what my mouse is doing right now, I need to have a offset line from the base that is up 140 millimeters, because that's how tall my side pieces are. So that's where I want the cutout to start. So let's start off with that. So my offset tool from the base here, excuse me, just realized I still have a line ticked. I'm just unticking everything, make sure I've got no tools selected or no lines selected. Go back and select my offset tool, click on the bottom, make sure the arrow's facing up and into my rectangle, click again and put in my 140. So that's one line. Okay, I'm then going to do my inwards offsets, or I could offset from the center. It's probably going to be easier if I offset in from that center point. So if I, instead of using the offset tool, use my line tool, I go and find the center point of that top line. So I want to make sure that whole top line is highlighted yellow, and that when I hover over the little box in the center, that I get that nice line with the solid dot in the middle of it. That's showing that's the center of the line. If I click there, my handle is going to be made out of some 42 by 42. So I want to be half of that 42 millimeters on either side of center. So half of 42 is 21. So I'm going to go 21 either side. So I'm going to start to draw a line. I'm going to click, then I'm going to type in 21, press enter. Now I've got another line that wants to be drawn. I don't want that, so I'm going to go and untick my line tool and tick it again. From that same center point, I'm going to click again, make another line going the other way, also 21. Okay, then I'm going to join each of those corners right across and down to that point where that 140 millimeter offset line upwards hits the side. So I'll do that on both sides. Oh, I've clicked on the incorrect line, so I'm just going to untick the line tool using L, pick it up again and make sure I click on the correct one. There we go. Alright, so now I've got these areas here on either side that I'm going to be able to make sure that I don't extrude and don't make part of my 3D shape. So that's all of my drawing. I've got my construction line detail, I've got my angles drawn, I've got my 42 millimeters up the top here to allow for my handle to sit there. Okay, I'm happy with that. So I'm going to accept that sketch. I'm going to go back to that view that I had, that front view, and now it's time to extrude. So I'm going to extrude, and I need to select the parts that need to be extruded. So I want that bit and the bottom bit together. That's that whole end, and I need them to be 19 millimeters thick, and I'm gonna accept. Last thing I've got to do is put the groove in the bottom of my end piece for the base. This needs to be the same measurements that I used on the sides. So I'm going to quickly go back to the sides, and I'm going to double check what those were. So it was 5 millimeters from the bottom and then a 3 millimeter groove. So I'm going to go back into my ends, sketch, select the face the groove's going on, use my offset tool, start from the base, going to go up 5, enter. Use my offset tool again, go from that line up 3. Okay, accept that sketch, and then I can go into my extrude tool, select that little area there. I'm not adding, I want to remove in the extrude menu, and I want to remove. This time I'm going to do the same, 9.5, because it was easy to remember. Alright, halfway, and accept. So I've now got the groove for the plywood base, I've got my cutouts here, okay, and I've got my end piece fully finished. I also have my side piece fully finished. Now the last thing I have to do is the handle. I need to know how long the handle is going to be. So what I'm going to do to help visualize it a bit better, I'm actually going to go to my assembly and put these pieces together as a complete toolbox, and then I can use the measurement tool to check how long the handle needs to be. So I'm going to go into the assembly. I'm going to go to my insert menu. Now I'm going to need 2 of each of these. Okay, so I'm going to click on my end and put one end in there. I'm going to click on it again, and I'm going to put it in a different spot. I'm then going to pick up sides. Apologies again for the phone. So I've got 2 of each part here. But when we're looking at them, we've got a problem. Okay, the 2 ends, one of them needs to be rotated around so that this face here is facing this face here, not they're facing the same way. We need to do the same thing with the side pieces. So to do that, we've got to make sure we're out of the insert menu, so we've got to hit the tick. To rotate a part, we need to click on it once and we get all these rotation options come up. Okay, we need to select the correct axis of rotation. So this top one here rotates back and forth. Okay, if I get rid of it and change that to 0, it'll go back to its original position. If I click on this one here and hold, this one rotates it that way. So that is not the correct axis. Put that back to 0 as well. What we want to do is rotate around this axis. Okay, we need to rotate it a full 180 degrees. So if I start rotating it, I then have the option to type in how much I want to rotate it. So 180, and I can press enter. Then I click out of it, and that is rotated the correct way around. I then need to do the same thing with one of the sides. I'm going to do it to this one here. So that same plane, start rotating it, type in my 180, press enter, click away. Now everything is around how it's supposed to be. Now it's time for us to fasten them together. So remember, we use our fastened mate tool. This is the tool we use if we want to fasten things together with no ability for them to move. Okay, we want them to be, for all intensive purposes, glued together. So I'm going to click on the fasten mate tool. I then need to use a point on the 2 parts I'm trying to join together where they are going to join exactly. So I know that this corner here is going to join to this little corner of the rebate here. Remember, I also need to make sure that the little axes, so that blue, green, red line, is in exactly the same orientation or facing exactly the same way when I click on both pieces. So right here I can see blue is up, so I'm going to click. When I come and click over on this piece, I want to make sure the same, I've got blue facing up. Okay, and I'm always focusing on that blue line. So click, and they've joined together. I can then click the tick to say yes, I'm happy with that one, and it automatically opens up another one. So now I'm going to do the other end piece. So I'm going to use this corner and join it to that one, making sure it's correct orientation. Tick. Alright, now I can just see parts that are going to join. If I was having trouble with the correct orientation here, I could spin this around, alright, so that it's a bit easier. So I've now spun it completely around and I can see a little bit easier where things are going to join. So now I'm going to join this corner to this corner here. I might have to zoom in and get it, yep, for the axis to pop up right there. Click again. I don't have to do the other corner because this one in this orientation fastened there, it's automatically fastened at the other side as well. Okay, now I can go back to our original front to right view. Okay, and it's assembled. Now I need to make sure I exit the fastening tool. Alright, and you can see our 3 fasteners here that have put this together are saved. Now I need the dimension for how long the handle is so I can draw the handle. Okay, the handle is going to be from this point here on the inside edge to this point here. So we need to find something else in this drawing that is also going from the inside of this face to the inside of this one. And it's actually this line here from the end of the rebate to the end of the rebate there. So if I use my measure details tool down here in the bottom right hand corner, if I click on that, I can go and click on one of those lines, right? It needs to be just the line, okay, and it will tell me down here how long it is. So it's 462 long, okay? So you might want to write that down, or you can just leave this open while we go back into the handle and we can jump between the two tabs. And now click on the handle. Now I said the handle was 42 by 42 stock, and it is 462 millimeters long. So I'm going to go here, use my sketch tool. I'm going to do from the top plane, use a rectangle. The length was 462, and then I needed the other measurements are 42 by 42, so I'm going to do 42. Accept that sketch. I'm then going to extrude it 42 millimeters. Okay, so that is the basic 42 by 42 stock for the handle. Okay, I will do another video after this one showing how we can add some curves and modify this handle so it would be a bit more comfortable. But for now, I'm just going to go and put it in the assembly. And remember, anything that we do to this part later on will get modified in the assembly automatically anyway. So now that I've got that part roughly to size, I can go into the assembly. I can insert the handle, zoom out a bit, okay, close my insert menu, and now I just need to fasten the handle. So I'm going to pick the midpoint, alright, of the handle. Okay, and you can see the blue is facing out to the right, so I've got to remember that when I go to click on the midpoint up here, I need to, if I got to zoom in, okay, so that's incorrect. So if it's wrong, I can just click the cross and it'll go away. And let's try again. So I've got to try and get the axes correct. So there, we've got the blue up this time. Click. Now we're going to go in here and try and get the blue facing up like that. Click. And we can see the handle is in place. I'm going to close our fastened menu. So that is our rough toolbox. Okay. As I said, if I want to change any dimensions, alright, I'm not happy with that overall basic design, I wanted to make it a bit taller or a bit longer, a bit shorter, anything like that, I can easily go back and modify dimensions. So for example, I could go back to my ends, go into my original sketch, and I can decide that that 300 wasn't tall enough, it looks a bit short and stocky, let's make it 350. I modify it, accept it, can go back into the assembly, and you can see it's been modified. Okay, so any changes you make to individual pieces will get changed in the assembly. So I'm going to do another video on how to modify the handle separately. You can go over and check that one out.